Praise Ahia family. He's the Most High, holy and eternal, King over all kings, the only true wise and living God, the Almighty. Well, happy Sabbath, family. In fact, happy Purim. So for us, it's the last and final day of the Purim feast, which of course we celebrate across 3 days, from the 13th to the 15th of Adar, which for us this year was between the 21st to the 24th of February 2024, so concluding at sunset tonight. So we're going to come on to talk a little further about Purim, to memorialize that a little more formally as we get further into today's session. But as you recall, we had been continuing on our journey, really doing our spiritual mapping exercise, looking at our present day Mystery Babylon beast system. In fact, she's called many things. She's called Mystery Babylon. She's called Wewillrestorehispaths, which, as you recall, we stated means quickly to the spoil, swiftly to the plunder. She's also called Jezebel, and she's also called Sodom and Egypt. Also is another name that could also be given to this mystery. As you recall, the book of Revelation explains that that is a name that was given to the place where Christ was crucified. But of course, as we're saying, it is a global system. So that being the designated name for Israel could also be equally taken to be a wider name for this whole construct, which would then be governing Israel also at that time in the end of days, according to what the prophecies in the scriptures decree or tell us. So we're still continuing really to do that exercise, really unfolding or unveiling this mystery. She sits amongst us in plain sight in the earth today. As we can see, really quite a colossal system. And we're going to though start to move away really from this particular topic. So this may be the final, or perhaps penultimate video that we do, or session that we do, around looking at Mystery Babylon. And as I say, we haven't even really begun to scratch the surface really on this topic. It is a huge, prolific topic, which we could still be happily doing videos on this time next year. But I think in view of what we've been saying as well about our need as Yeshurunites to now understand our duty to return to Yahuwah, and what Yahuwah is requiring us to do in terms of returning to him now in spirit and in truth, I want to start to, I guess, look at what it means, I guess, to live in the spirit or to walk in the spirit. So we're going to transition into that as our next topic or area for deeper biblical study and review. But before we do, we're going to focus today on looking at, I guess, how ancient biblical prophecies really, the role they've played in the unfolding of this whole human history, to really understand how the word of God and the words and the prophets, or the prophecies decreed by the prophets, really have shaped our modern world, essentially, because we saw and have been looking at the fact that the whole unfolding of, well, human history was very, very much foretold by Daniel, if you recall, in 2nd Daniel. If you recall the interpretation he provides to Nebuchadnezzar concerning the dream that Nebuchadnezzar sees of this image with the head of gold, of course, which signified Nebuchadnezzar himself. And we see that really in the whole unfolding of that whole dream narrative, that human history has exactly, precisely unfolded to the letter of that prophecy or of that dream as was given to Nebuchadnezzar. So really, as I say, we're going to come on today to look at another slightly unusual biblical prophecy about the end times, or about the fourth beast system, which we have concluded that we're currently living today, because we have explained that we're currently in the rule of the seventh king of the Mystery Babylon system. If you recall, we've explained that, or rather, I should say, the Word of God tells us in Revelation 17 that this whole mystery system will be governed by 8 kings in all. Well, 7 kings, essentially, because the 8th king is one of the 7, so someone who lived in the past is coming back in the future, essentially. So it tells us that this whole system is being governed by these 7 kings, essentially. So we're going to look at what the prophet Ezra now had to say about the fourth beast system, because he did actually have a vision about the fourth beast, believe it or not, as far back ago as he was prophesying, because if you recall Ezra, he lived after Isaiah, as a matter of fact. He was actually prophesying in around the 6th century before the coming of Christ. So still really, we're still talking about ancient times, really. And to see really how the unfolding of the words of these prophets have really unfolded to the letter, precisely as we are now seeing in our world around us today. So, and I've often said that many don't think of prophets like Isaiah, Ezra, even Micah, even Joel, perhaps. Well, maybe Joel, we might concede that Joel was an end-time prophet, because we recall he wrote very much about the day of the Lord in his book of Joel. But really, it's quite astounding to see, especially when you read the Bible from the perspective, as I've been saying, this book was written to one specific group of people. And if you read the book from that perspective, there's a wealth of interpretation that you would otherwise miss, that you do actually begin to see. So we really have been explaining as well that it's very, very important to read the Bible with that perspective in mind. So as we are going to come on to look at the writings of Ezra, and to look at the vision that he actually saw about the fourth beast system, and we're also going to look at, I guess, how that really does play out in our world today in terms of, well, just some of the events and things that we see around us that really are indicators of, I guess, what time it is and where we are, and that we are in fact very much living in Babylon, whether we acknowledge it or not. And also we're going to, I guess, not to understand, I guess, the relevance, I guess, of what we are looking at in the Word of God, or just to the way that things unfold around us. So have a look at this. This came up in my feed in the week. Take a look at this, and we'll come back and discuss further.
Eric Prince, a former officer in the U.S. Navy and the founder of the American private military company Blackwater, has stated that African countries should be recolonized because of the perceived corruption and selfishness of their leaders. Prince expressed this stance in a short video clip shared on Africa Facts Zone by proposing that if African nations face challenges in self-governance, it may be appropriate for them to undergo a new form of invasion. In the video, Prince expressed his conviction that Africans encounter difficulties in self-governance due to leaders prioritizing personal gains over the well-being of their citizens. He argued that if ineffective leadership persists, it is justified to reintroduce foreign governance, stating it is time for us to just put the imperial hat back on to say we are going to govern those countries if you are incapable of governing yourself, because enough is enough. When asked if he was endorsing colonialism, Prince confirmed absolutely yes.
Then it's time for us to just put the imperial hat back on to say, we're going to govern those countries if you're incapable of governing yourselves, because enough is enough. We're done being invaded.
Because our own national security risk is at stake.
Exactly.
National security interests are at stake.
You can say that about pretty much all of Africa. They're incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens because the governments there are all about looting and pillaging and lining their pockets and going shopping in Paris instead of actually making their country better.
People on the left are going to watch this. They're going to say, wait a minute, Eric Prince is talking about being a colonialist again.
Absolutely. Yes.
In essence, Eric Prince is suggesting that African leaders are excessively corrupt, to the extent that the only viable solution is to regain control over African countries. He further remarked that he believed this idea was suitable not only for Africa, but also for Latin America.
Well, what did you think of that? So, I must confess, when I did initially see that, I wasn't all that surprised. I think we have all been expecting this sort of narrative for some time, to be honest. In fact, I thought they might have put a little bit of something, a bit of a twist on it. I didn't think they would come out with it quite as overtly as they have done. It's been very, very apparent, really, that they said they gave these nations independence back in the 70s or I can't recall, 50s, 60s, when a lot of the nations in Africa did supposedly gain their ceremonial independence, is all you can call it. But really we see that essentially the Western nations have never left Africa. really to be. And we did also start to look at this. We did a kind of closer look at the beast exercise, if you recall, by looking at Revelation 13:2. We did actually see essentially that this whore of Babylon was sitting on this beast, which we said was equivalent to the body of the leopard representing Africa in a very real sense, having this hideous deformity of being given 7 heads by the European powers who had imposed their crowns, their horns, and lions' mouths as well upon this creature as well, to control and to rule over it. So I guess it's a narrative we have been expecting and have been seeing for some time. And of course, you may say, well, how is this related to the whole subject of Mystery Babylon? But it is essentially the outworking of the doctrine or the policy of Mystery Babylon. She is, as we have said, Meha-Shawel-Hashbaz, which we've explained means quickly to the spoil, swiftly to the plunder, is one of the names she's known by. So she has, throughout her long history, exhibited this sort of, I guess, attitude, behavior, well, towards Africa particularly, helping herself to whatever commodities or resources or peoples are necessary to further her empire, the ends of her empire, and this whole behemoth of a global system. It's always been this way down through antiquity. And I was even quite surprised or alarmed to see when I began to actually look into the apocryphal books, because certainly in the evangelical churches, we're told not to read the apocryphal books. They are not righteous books. But we have actually explained that these were actually books that were in the initial 1611 translation of the King James Version of the Bible when it was initially translated. They were in that Bible. So there were a total of 80 books in the Bible, and then 13 of those books were subsequently taken out. And I was quite surprised to see that when I came to read the book of First Maccabees, to understand that what they define was really the first contact or initial interactions, if you will, of our people, Black Yeshuaite people, then with Greek civilization, or with the first Europeans that we encountered, who our forefathers would have called the Kittim or the Chittim. Only to see that it was, well, quite a brutal encounter. In fact, it's been no different. I guess we could say that in that the nations have been quite consistent, because their treatment and contempt, I can only say, for non-European peoples has been consistent over that period of time in terms of the way they have actually treated our people historically, which is true. So I don't say all this out of a state of bitterness. I don't even ascribe all responsibility for, I guess, the whole transpiring of these events and of history to Europeans entirely. And that's not at all what I'm saying, because had Yasharel walked in her covenant, as Yahuwah had required us to do, none of these things would really have befallen us in the first place, really. So as Yasharelite people, we also need to take full accountability and responsibility as well for our part in the whole, I guess, unfolding of this history, and do what Yahuwah is now requiring us to do, and to make a return to him in spirit and in truth as he is requiring. And that's really going to, I guess, segue into our next topic for biblical study, which, as I have explained, will be more focused around looking at how we really do enter into that life in the Spirit, or walking by the Spirit, as we did have been starting to look at the fact that Yahuwah is requiring us to do. Because we saw the dangers, of course, in the experiences of our forefathers, who, not having had that experience, were not then able to make the successful transition to return into their promised land, even though it was given to them from before the foundations of the world. So that's, we're going to come on to, I guess, to understand, how this all fits together, because, as I say, this whole strategy of colonialization was actually a doctrine, essentially. I call it the Discovery Doctrine, because that's really what it was. It was really cemented by 3 papal laws, which were passed by, I guess, the Santa Claus, or the Father Christmas, namely Pope Nicholas V, who began to actually pass papal bulls to legislate the legalization, if you will, of the kings of Europe. The bulls were given to the kings of Europe to initiate the trade, essentially, and to colonize foreign lands of the New Worlds. So really this whole, I guess, construct has redefined the way that our world is today, really entirely. Because as I said, the final papal law that was passed was actually passed by Pope Nicholas. It was passed by his successor, Pope Alexander VI. And he passed that papal bull called Inter Cetera to settle a squabble between Spain and Portugal that broke out about the allocation of lands in the New World. So what the Pope did was he actually, just prescribed an arbitrary line of longitude around about the kind of area of Brazil. And he gave everything on the left of that line to Spain and everything on the right to Portugal, which is the reason why to this day, the countries on the left of that line to this day speak Spanish, all the countries on the right speak Portuguese. So, as we say, it's been a very ancient construct or system of government that's come down to us from antiquity, being initiated by Nebuchadnezzar, who was its first king, who of course was an Assyrian. And we have explained that, of course, the Assyrians, well, in today's parlance, will be known as Negro peoples, or you and I, because Nebuchadnezzar himself was a Chaldean. And if you recall, our forefather Abraham was actually born in a land called Ur of the Chaldeans. So our father Abraham was also a Chaldean. And if you recall also Moses, when talking of his father, well, actually he was speaking about Jacob. I think it's in Deuteronomy 26, verse 4, I believe that's correct. He says, as an Assyrian ready to perish was my father. Of course, he's talking about Jacob and how he went into the land of Egypt with 70 souls, of course, that went down to Egypt with him. I think he's actually counting the men that went down, possibly more, with some of their wives. But anyway, he's saying that he was Assyrian. It should correctly read an Assyrian, because Syrians, again, is a separate race to Assyrians. So it should read, an Assyrian ready to perish was my father, speaking of Jacob, who, of course, fled into Egypt in order to escape the famine, or perishing from the famine in the land, in the promised land. So anyway, it's been rather a long ramble. But as I say, that whole policy that Eric Prince there is actually telling of is really, I guess, a covert policy of this, Mystery Babylon, if you will. It's been her policy throughout her long history over many thousands of years, well, at least 2,000 years, under Edom anyway. So we're going to, as I say, continue to explore tonight the prophecies really of the prophet Ezra around the fourth beast system. Because as I say, not many are aware that many of the Old Testament prophets were in fact revelational prophets or wrote extensively about the end times. But they in reality did. And you'll find that even prophets, even like King David, for instance, because King David was a prophet also. But you'll see that even he was aware of the plight of our people in the end of days. And really, they were aware that we would be scattered, I guess, well, throughout all the known world. And that really has come to pass as they foresaw. And in many of their writings, they really have been trying to, I guess, give us subtle hints, I guess, to guide us on our journey home in actually returning to Yahuwah, starting to make a return to the covenant and to our Heavenly Father. So there is really, I guess, a mandate that Yahuwah is requiring of Yashrax, particularly now, to now begin to return and to come back to him. We know that Yahuwah, I'm not saying that Yahuwah is selective or for a certain people only. It was an open and wide invitation to all. But I think we can see extensively that certainly many Gentiles really are, I don't know if I say turning their back, but are, in a sense, it almost feels like they're kind of falling away, really, from wanting to come to Yahuwah, at least in the way that he requires. Because to a great extent, there are so many, I guess, agendas that are really put around the gospel as it's currently proclaimed. Particularly in America, we see a lot of kind of, I'm not saying that it's it's not a sin to be patriotic for your nation at all, and that is not necessarily a bad thing, but where it becomes a little bit, well, not good, is when it begins to, I guess, take over your kind of interpretation and your perception and the way you actually approach and come to God, when you kind of do it through that lens, because the gospel wasn't really made for that. It's a free and an open gospel that Yahuwah has extended to all people to come to him. And this is very, very true. So I'm looking at, I guess, in these sessions, really, I guess, from at Yeshurite's perspectives, not in an attempt to be selective, but in an attempt, I guess, to build in the narratives that have so far been omitted or largely left out, because normally other agendas that do encourage more adherence to patriotism and other things have really come in to the message and eroded a lot of the actual truth of the messages that are in this book that are not really known or spoken of at all. So we do focus on the Asherite perspectives as well, as we're going to do today in today's session. So today's session we're calling either Mystery Babylon Today or Wewillrestorehispaths Today, Prophet Ezra's Vision, or the visions of Prophet Esdras. So we're going to look at one of the apocryphal writings of the Prophet Ezra. So the book is called Esdras, or his name is called Esdras, is the name that he's given actually for this book. But we're going to look at the actual provenance for both the books of Ezra and Esdras to understand from his genealogy, as he provides it in the preface of 2nd Esdras, that the prophet Ezra and Esdras are essentially one and the same prophet. So we're going to come on to actually verify and prove that as we go further into this session. So you'll also notice as well that I have also watermarked a number of the slides for today's session with this image. So this image is an image of the Tower of Babel. Now I did actually go into this, or I did a kind of brief kind of outline of it in the previous video, which I'm sorry I haven't yet published. I've had a few logistical issues with my edit software. So there was actually a video that should precede this video that I haven't yet been able to push out or publish because I've had a few problems with editing it. But I did actually explain that Babel, essentially, does kind of feed into this overall kind of Mystery Babylon system because, of course, as we discussed in the previous video, which you'll see eventually when it comes out, we did show that Babel really was the kingdom of darknesses. Well, it was, I should say that Mystery Babylon was essentially the kingdom of darknesses' response to, I guess, the overthrow of Babel in a real sense as well. We did actually explain the whole history, of course, behind the tower and this picture. So you're looking here at a picture that was actually painted in the 16th century by an artist called Peter Bruegel. And he really did depict the construction, or Babel under construction. You can see how unstable he makes it look, kind of leaning off to one side there. So we know that according to the actual story that's given about the Tower of Babel in the Bible, that it was built by a monolingual humanity as a mark of their achievement, really. They didn't want to be scattered. So Yahuwah had at that point given man a command to really, well, to scatter essentially and to move and to populate the whole of the earth at that time. But, of course, man, of course, having, I guess, another idea, another thought, wanted to defy God, wanted to remain as one kind of a peoples, and they feared being scattered across all the earth. So, of course, they came together and said, oh, come, let's build us a tower whose top may reach heaven as well. And Enoch, in his book of Enoch, does also give a fuller kind of telling, really, around this whole a period in history, period in time, and how it unfolded, and explained that essentially there was really, I guess, a spiritual ulterior motive that Nimrod was driving at. And he was very much building this tower as a, I guess, in order to kind of resist and to fight against God, in a sense, out of his, I guess, anger for you who was sending the flood as well. So he gives a story about how they built, and when they built to kind of a certain level, they shot arrows up into the heavens as well to fight against the host of heaven. As well, he'd actually explain the kind of events around the construction of the tower. Because, of course, I believe Shem didn't actually attend to participate in this actual building of the tower. So it's believed that the actual Hebrew language spoken at that time wasn't scattered because Shem didn't actually attend. In fact, I believe he fled instead. But it's noteworthy, as you can see, that Bruegel really shows the architecture of the tower. You can see that it's got numerous arches to look almost quite similar to kind of Roman engineering and the Colosseum, as he would have seen it at the time. So I believe Peter Bruegel did actually visit Rome in 1552 to 1553, to be precise. And the actual reminiscence or the likeness to Roman engineering isn't without significance at all. So Rome was intended, as you know, by the Caesars to be the eternal city. They intended for it to last forever. And its decay and ruin is taken to symbolize vanity and the transience of earthly efforts. And also to be symbolic of the kind of religious turmoil between the Catholic and the newly emerging Protestant religion was starting to emerge at the time, as there were starting to be other kind of dissenting churches splitting off from this mother Catholic Church. So, of course, as I say, it's built to very much to look like the Colosseum. The Colosseum, of course, of the fame of being the place where many of our forefathers would have perished, particularly those that really did espouse the Christian religion at that time. So it was a very, very expensive structure, of course, and it's actually believed it was actually paid for out of money that was taken out of our temple at Jerusalem as well, from the temple treasures that were taken out of the temple. So our forefathers would really have seen this whole construction as a sign really of hubris. And many of our forefathers were actually slain there, being either fed to lions for entertainment or made to fight gladiators or various forms of capital punishment. So you can see they're showing the kind of tower here as an ascending spiral, really. And the kind of arches being built kind of perpendicular to each other, so that they kind of, well, making the whole thing look even more unstable, to be honest. And you can even see that some of the actual levels at the bottom haven't even yet been fully built, are still under construction or haven't been built at all, and yet they are starting to build up on very, very shaky, crumbling foundations. So they've not completed the actual lower layers before they're actually starting to build the higher layers and levels as well. So as I say, this whole Mystery Babylon system was very, very much the Kingdom of Darkness's response to that, to a very great extent. And you can see that. So you're looking here at the Parliament building in Strasbourg for the EU. So this building really is meant to look, well, it's meant to be a replica in a sense of Babel, the Babel Tower. So, I mean, you may think, well, we are told that the EU is a secular organization, so surely they couldn't be aligning this building to the actual Babel in the Bible, could they? Really? Seriously? But it would appear that parliamentarians do actually believe in Babel, because apparently a Strasbourg-born journalist was actually asked some years ago if she understood the meaning of the tower or of this building. And she confirmed that she did, and also confirmed that the members of the European Parliament also understood that it represented Babel from the Bible. And then she went on to say that the purpose of the European Union was to finish what Nimrod and the people together failed to do some 3,500 years ago. So she said 3,500 years. I actually believe it would have been longer than that, but okay, but that's an interesting point. So, so there are many symbols of Babel and also Babylon also, because outside of now another of the buildings, and again in This one is in Brussels now. So this is outside the Council of Ministers building, otherwise called the Council of Europe building in Brussels, stands this particular statue. Now this statue is meant to be of Zeus. So the Greeks worshipped Baal, or the god Baal, as Zeus. And the Romans called Zeus, the Romans called Baal Jupiter. Essentially, but it's one and the same god or idol. And often he's represented by a bull, usually represented by a bull. So this woman and the beast symbolize Europa, the consort of Zeus. So interesting that the continent of Europe is actually called after this mystery woman. So she's actually riding on the back of this beast. So again, we see analogies even to Revelations here. And this is actually standing outside, as I say, of the Council of Ministers building in Brussels today. If you go to that building, you will see this statue there. And it's a representation, you could say, really, of this whole kind of mystery Babylon image, really. The woman, the whore, the woman riding the actual beast. As you can see here. So there are really, I guess, symbols of Babylon, Babel, constantly around us. And does anyone also remember this? You can see all sorts of imagery there. Even the all-seeing eye shape that they had gathered around the bull as well. The bull representing Baal as well. In case you're any doubt that Mystery Babylon worships Baal. And then we have also looked I forget which video it was, but we looked at the fact that the word Lord that we're using in the Bible to refer to God actually means Baal as well. So even in our Bibles, it's found a way to creep its way into our interpretation, understanding, and handling of the scriptures. So we did look at the actual scripture, if you recall. I can pull it up again for any who may not have seen that video. But it's in Hosea 2:16. Because as I said, when I understood that the word Lord meant Baal, I began to look for evidence in the word of God to see whether there was any scriptures that would substantiate and tell us that Yahuwah was saying that in the end of days, his people would actually be calling him Baal. Not intentionally, but we'll be doing it nevertheless. And of course, I found the evidence, as I explained in Hosea 2:16-17, which says, "And it shall be at that day, saith the Lord, that thou shalt call me Ishi, and shalt call me no more Baali. For I will take away the names of Balaam out of her mouth, and they shall no more be remembered by their name." So you can see here, Yahuwah is saying that his people are indeed calling him Lord, but affectionately, because of course we're not aware that the word Lord means Baal. And of course, Yahuwah's people would have affection for him. So that what Yahuwah is actually hearing is Baali. But isn't Yahuwah great? Though, even though many of us are calling him the wrong thing, he is aware of our failing, our weakness, and so is not declining nevertheless to answer us, but is saying that a time will come when he will correct that error, and he will take the name of Balaam totally out of our mouths, so we no longer call him any longer, or refer to him or know him by that name. So that's the reason you often hear me use the word Yahuwah in the place of Lord, because I wasn't so keen to use the word Lord after I became aware that it actually meant Baal. So you can see there. Okay, so let's go to the opening of our session formally now by doing a reading of the law, as we normally like to do. And then we'll come in and do a little bit of an intro around Purim. And then we'll go directly into our reading of Esdras 11 to see what the prophet Ezra had to say about the fourth beast system. So let's go now to our reading of the law. And we're going to read the law today from the Old Testament. I do beg your pardon. Okay, so we're going to read the law today from the Old Testament. And then we're going to come back, as I say, to start to really conclude on what we've been looking at around Mystery Babylon, to start to move on to our next topic, really for biblical study, which, as I say, is going to be looking at life in the spirit and how we return to Yahuwah in spirit and in truth, and do our best to make a spiritual return to him in sincerity. So we're going to do 4 readings, 1 longish reading and 3 short readings. So let's begin. Exodus 20, verses 1 to 17. And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. For the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honour thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbour. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbour's. That's the end of our first reading. So just read the 10 Commandments, essentially we've just read. So our second reading now is taken from Matthew 5, verses 17 to 19. And this reader explains Yeshua's attitude to, I guess, the law or the commandments. So Yeshua here is saying himself directly, do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So our third reading is taken from Matthew 22, 36 to 40. So Matthew 22, starting from verse 35 to 40. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Our fourth and final reading is taken from Revelations 22, verses 14 to 15, and that reads, Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. For without are dogs, and sorcerers, and whoremongers, and murderers, and idolaters, and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie. Okay, so that's the end of our reading of the law. And I was going to show to you, because there seems to be quite a lot of debate as to whether we still are under an obligation to even keep the commandments in our present day. But what really are we saying if we're saying as Christians, as believers, that the commandments are no longer in force? Because all the commandments are simply saying is, you shouldn't have any other gods before Yahuwah. You shouldn't lie. You shouldn't steal. You shouldn't bear false witness. You shouldn't commit adultery. You shouldn't covet your neighbor's property or possessions. So if we're saying that these things are not relevant, because we all know as believers that we are under, well, I wouldn't say an obligation, but we all know we shouldn't do those things. Those are just basic things we know that we shouldn't do as Christians. Because of course, if you're loving your neighbor as yourself, you're not going to lie against them. You're not going to steal from them. You're not going to want to, do anything at all to injure or to cause them pain or hurt. So we do know that we are not to do these things. But there is still this debate, and I guess this may go in some large part to explaining the reason as to why, and that is the case. Fair use.
How the law stirs up sin. We looked at that. So if we Christians hope for victory over sin, we shouldn't have any relationship with the law, not even the Ten Commandments. If we should hope for victory over sin, we should not have any relationship with the law, which is over 600 of them, and also not even the Big Ten. Not even the Big Ten. Ooh, I know that just freaking your tradition out. Not even the Big Ten. Because Jesus died to free me from the Big Ten.
So you can see really some of the, reasons for some of the confusion. And a lot of this confusion, of course, arises because, of course, we are essentially in what I call the Babylonian church. And we have really been explaining or showing, I guess, some of the actual reasons for some of the actual misunderstandings that are prevalent within, Christendom currently. So really, with some kind of misinterpretations from the book, because Yeshua himself made quite clear, even when in his own ministry, he was constantly saying to people, your sins are forgiven you, don't sin again, lest a worse thing come upon you, and telling people also to keep the commandments as well, as we saw in Matthew. We looked at Matthew 17, verses 17 to 19. We saw quite clearly Yahuwah saying that I didn't come to remove the law, but to fulfill it. So, but we can see there are some ministers who are trying to say that no, the law no longer applies. And this really is an extremely dangerous teaching, particularly for Yashraelites, because of course that, I guess, those instructions form quite an important part of our covenant as well. So yes. So as I was explaining, we are currently on the final day of Purim. So for us, Purim is a 3-day feast. I know there are some that do celebrate it for 2 days. We observe it for the 3. Well, partly because if you recall in ancient Babylon, our forefathers, the Jews, those who were in the unwalled cities, so who had actually spread throughout all the 127 provinces of the then Babylon, which of course comprised the whole of the earth at that time. If you recall, they were actually defeating their enemies on the 13th of Adar, and then they celebrated Purim on the 14th, the following day, if you recall. Whereas at Shushan, the palace, which is the capital then of the Persian Empire, the Jews were still fighting their enemies on the 13th and 14th of Adar. So they didn't actually celebrate Adar until the 15th of Adar. So, which is why, for us at Repairers of the Breach, we do keep it as a 3-day festival from the 13th to the 15th of Adar, which this year corresponds to the 21st to the 24th of February 2024. So our theme for this year's Purim that we did look into was, we called Yahuwah Nissi, or Israel, as in black Hebrew Israel, or black Yasharel, Israel's eternal reminder to never forget Amalek. So of course, if you recall in Exodus 17, 15 to 16, Moses, prescribes, a statute, if you will, for Israel, saying that Israel should never forget Amalek, and that Yahuwah will actually make war against Amalek from generation to generation. Because we can see that, if you recall what Amalek did to Israel, so Israel had really gotten 2 steps out of her captivity in Egypt, when Amalek came and actually attacked and slew a good number of Israelites from the rear. So an Amalekite enemy is never an enemy that will actually confront you kind of face to face out in the open. They are a very cowardly enemy, and they only will strike either in the dark or from behind or from some angle where you're not expecting an attack. So if you recall, they were just literally starting to come out of Egypt to go into to head towards their promised land. And Amalek attacked those who were at the back of the actual caravan, or those who were traveling at the back. So perhaps really who he attacked were the elderly, the sick, the infirm, and children, those who couldn't walk as fast as those who were at the front. And they'd killed off a good number of them before an alarm they were able to scream out and raise an alarm to know that there was actually an attack. And then the actual men, by the time the actual mighty men came down to help, quite a good number of them had been slain, unfortunately. So this was so displeasing to Yahuwah that someone could actually, strike when someone was so down, and like kicking someone when they're down, sort of thing. It made Yahuwah so cross that he took up an eternal statute really against Amalek, really for that reason, that he would destroy and wage war against them, because of course Amalek does the same. So how do I mean by that? Well, if you recall, last New Year, 1st of Nisan, we actually, if you recall, did a special session, because we did actually explain, and we'll say we'll apply this year, that we're going to start a new tradition at Repairers of the Breach. If you recall, we introduced it last New Year's Day, last 1st of Nisan, and we explained that we're going to actually look at Moses is rearing up the tabernacle in the wilderness also on that day, because the 1st of Nisan also represents the first day on which Moses actually reared up the tabernacle in the wilderness. So as an aside, we're going to do that again this year. And the theme of this year's 1st of Nisan will be called The Tabernacle in the Wilderness, A Plan for Devotion. So anyway, we explained in our last session that one of the other notable events that actually transpired on the 1st of Nisan was that this Haman in Babylon cast the lot, or the pur, against Israel. And he did it for a period of 1 year. So literally from the 1st of Nisan to the 29th of Adar, which I guess Adar is like the equivalent in the Gregorian calendar to December. Yeah, even though December signifies really the 10th month, because Dec means 10, doesn't it? But it should to show you that it's still really not the end of the year. But anyway, it's he cast the lot for a period of a full 12 months against Israel, just to find the best day to conduct a genocide against this people. So the reason really that Mordecai and Esther, well, Mordecai particularly, mandated this day be kept was really to alert his people never to forget something, really, and that was they shouldn't forget what Amalek had done. And if you think that's insignificant, the prophet Joel, in writing about the day of the Lord, makes allusion to this event transpiring again in the future. If you recall in Joel, I think it's Joel 3. I'm just going to check. I think it's Joel 3. I need to actually pull it up on my app here. So in Joel 3:3, Joel is actually saying that, well, one of Yahuwah's indictments, I guess, is that he said they cast a lot for my people and have given a boy for an harlot and sold a girl that they might drink wine, is what Yahuwah is saying here. And you know, it constantly surprises me that often people can read the Bible and can't see that Yahuwah is actually speaking to themselves really in this book, because there was only really one set of people that did essentially what Yahuwah is saying here. They gave a boy for a harlot and sold a girl to drink wine. Of course, that transpired, or that happened to the Yasharite people, the black Yasharite people, in their captivity and slavery. So he's saying that they also cast lots. So he's making allusion here to this event that transpired in ancient Babylon, actually transpiring again in the future, because he's now talking about the day of the Lord and this having happened again. So it gives us reason to understand there's, I guess, more we need to do to actually look into precisely what the events actually unfolded in Babylon, because there's something here that our forefathers are indicating or telling us we need to prepare and be aware of here as well. So possibly not sufficient time to go into the intricacies of Purim in this particular meeting. By all means, do go onto our website. We do have a number of teachings and posts published there looking at this whole, I guess, looking at Amalek and our need not to forget Amalek. They are actually posted on our words page, which is our kind of blog post page. But also, essentially, really, there is also, we called the title for this year's Purim, namely Purim, a battle in disguise, because essentially, as we've always said, the feast, besides being prophetic, in aligning us in terms of, I guess, for things that are to come, and memorializing also events that have occurred in the past, do also, through their sheer obedience, also, I guess, represent, I guess, a form of, if you like, spiritual warfare, if you like, as well. And we looked at our text was actually taken from Additions to Esther 7, verses 21 to 24. And this is really Mordecai's, I guess, decreed his descendants to us to continue to observe this feast for future generations as well, for all of these reasons as well, because it represents I guess, spiritual warfare in the sense that we are being obedient to, I guess, our covenant, the culture that we have, and we're also aligning ourselves to prepare as well, ourselves, our hearts as well to God, and also to be aware of kind of what Mordecai is indicating here, to prepare against it in the future. So that's what I'm going to recover on Purim. But as I say, we have been looking at or doing our spiritual mapping exercise on this mystery Babylon. And I did say that we were actually going to come on to look at the vision of Prophet Ezra now, to see what he had to say really about the whole unfolding of this fourth beast system. So let's go on to do that quickly now. So Prophet Ezra. So we're going to look at 2nd Ezra 11. So the book of 2nd Ezra 11 is sometimes known as the book of 4 Ezra. So in this visions we're going to come on to see, he does actually see an eagle, a three-headed eagle now, as representative of the fourth beast. So if you recall in previous meetings we've had, we did really see this fourth beast represented as this kind of leopard with 7 heads, and of course 10 horns upon the heads, with of course crowns upon all the horns, if you recall, and they're all having lions' mouths and also bear's feet, if you recall. But now we're seeing a representation of the same construct, it would say, or the fourth beast, now represented as an eagle, having now 12 feathered wings and 3 heads. So, okay, the mystery thickens. Let's kind of take a closer look. So, I was trying to find an image really to give a representation of what it's saying. This isn't really altogether an accurate image because it's got 4 legs, this particular creature, and the Word of God doesn't give justification for that. It does imply that it is one eagle in terms of having only 2 legs, but having this deformity of the 3 heads. And we do see this with the fourth beast system, this kind of hideous deformity of it having this multiple heads. But in this case, the actual middle head is bigger, or is more dominant, or is a kind of leading head on the other 2 heads as well. So here we see kind of this unholy trinity, really, in a sense, almost of the whore, the false prophet, and the dragon, essentially, as well. So we're going to come on to explain a bit further what we mean by that as we go further through. You'll see that there are all kinds of labels really put onto this kind of image. It's got legislative, executive, judicial, because some particularly some evangelicals particularly have a kind of need to always kind of make it look like a kind of an American model or mold of Babylon, because there are some who say that the US is Mystery Babylon, others say it's the UK, others say it's somewhere else. But essentially, it's a global system. So it's kind of wider than just being one particular country or place. So ignore all the labels for legislative, executive, judicial. Those aren't really relevant. That's not really what the word is saying at all. Someone's trying to make it fit their narrative. It was just the only image I could find, really, that, one of the images I found to kind of give a representation of what the prophet Ezra actually sees. So this is quite different, if you recall, to the beast that the Revelator John sees, which does corroborate more precisely with the actual image that Daniel saw as well. Daniel saw precisely the same image, essentially, as the Revelator John also saw in his book of Revelations. So why the difference? We're going to come on to look and to explain and kind of why the difference for that. And also, I also found this image as well. Apparently this 3-headed eagle design was, I think, used part of the actual heraldry for one of the Russian monarchs as well. I have actually seen this kind of imagery before. I think it also is meant to actually signify, in terms of the heads, one facing the past, another facing the future, another in the present. It's kind of meant to kind of give this kind of continuity of reign as well, impression of continuity of reign. You can see here really that's quite a ferocious bird holding a sword in one talon, and a picture of the world. I guess it's ruling by that in terms of the orb in the other talon as well. But of course, with a crown upon its central middle head. And I guess that is fitting and appropriate because it is a middle head. It is the most dominant. It's kind of been coordinating kind of all the activity of the overall bird, its overall creature. So what really are we seeing here? What really is Esdras seeing here? And why is it so different to the leopard that the revelator John and Daniel then saw? As I say, there are many who are incorrectly putting their own narratives to suit their own patriotism or whatever into biblical narratives, which isn't really a correct thing to do and not what we should be doing either at all. We should be keen to get to the truth regardless of what the actual narratives are around all of that. Jeremiah 12 here, in Jeremiah 12:10, is explaining that many pastors have destroyed my vineyard. They have trodden my portion underfoot. They made my pleasant portion a desolate wilderness. So this really is the plight, essentially, of Yeshua is saying of his people. And how have they been brought to desolation? Through the pastors who haven't really taught fully the word of God, because we just saw quite a notable pastor, the pastor I showed you, whose name I won't mention, is a notable pastor of a mega church. And he is actually telling people, or telling his members, that they don't need to actually keep the commandments, which is, I mean, nothing could be further from the truth at all. And if you have a pastor, particularly for a Yashrai, who's telling you you don't have to keep the commandments, then this could be really a fatal, it could be fatal, because we are under an obligation, of course, as believers, to uphold Yahweh's righteousness, and doing what is right does entail those rules. Not from doing it from a rule base, we're doing it from a law of love, because of course if we're walking in love, we're not going to want to sin against Yahuwah. We're not going to want to, go off and lie or steal or commit adultery. We won't do these things if we're walking by the law of love. So that really is how Yahuwah has really elevated, has magnified the law and made it honorable by really enshrining it now in this law of love. So if you observe the law of love, you automatically keep all of the commandments. As he's saying, if you love the Lord, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, that really encapsulates everything. That really is the essence of what the commandments truly are and were initially intended in the beginning to actually bring forth. But of course, they couldn't in and of themselves without this actual, by the Holy Spirit. So he's saying that because many are putting in their own inferences into the gospel for their own agendas and means, and of course his whole construct as well has been very guilty of that, it would have to be fair to be said, it has resulted in his vineyard, his own people being totally and utterly destroyed by it, by the false teachings. And we can see that. You don't have to ask if it hasn't had a negative impact on us as a Yashra-like people. And if our people haven't been destroyed really by, I guess, these false doctrines and notions. Many of us go to church every week, yet are we benefited or bettered? Are we prospered by what we're doing? Why is that? Has it not occurred to us that perhaps something may be out of alignment? Perhaps. So here we see that Yahuwah is actually saying that many pastors are responsible for the destruction of his vineyard. And he has actually prescribed as well judgment as well on pastors who misteach and who lead his portion astray. And he talks about them actually sullying the waters that they would drink from with their feet, and kind of making them muddy for his sheep to drink from. He does actually explain how displeased he is really with that. So as I say, second Ezra, or the book of 4 Ezra, does look at the fourth beast. So if you recall, we have explained actually from this image here, and this on the right shows Nebuchadnezzar's dream image, if you recall. So we have shown really that we are currently in the fourth beast system at the bottom here. So So the first beast, of course, was under Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. Second beast, Medo-Persia, under Darius and also Cyrus the Great. And then, of course, the third beast system was under Alexander the Great. And, of course, the fourth beast system is where we find ourselves today, in the fourth beast system here, at the bottom, in the feet that are part of iron, the feet and toes part of iron, part of miry clay, in the fourth beast system, under the rule of the seventh king. And we've taken that from Revelation 17:10, which we've explained. Yahuwah is saying here that in all there'll be a total of 7 kings that will actually rule the mystery Babylon's beast system. And he's telling John that as of John's day of actually writing, or Yahuwah speaking to him concerning this prophecy, that 5 of those kings were already fallen, or rather had already ruled and deceased, and that one was, or the one that was the one who was ruling in Revelator John's day, and that was Domitian, if you recall. And Domitian is also the one who consigned him to the Isle of Patmos, incidentally. And also, if you recall, the punishments that led to John being consigned there, because I believe he was given, as I explained, given a vial of poison initially to drink, which of course he was fine. He drank and was absolutely fine. And then he was actually immersed in a pan of boiling oil. He emerged totally unscathed, if you recall. So that was how he came to be consigned to the Isle of Patmos. You'd think really after someone emerging from a pan of boiling oil, which is not possible for any human to survive, that Domitian would have realized that there was something about John, perhaps just to leave well alone. But anyway, he consigned John to the Isle of Patmos. I understand that Domitian didn't, his passing, I understand he died a quite a brutal death. But anyway, it's not good really to do these things to God's people. But anyway, so we're told in this scripture that there are 7 kings. And of course, an 8th one, of course, who is coming, who is of the 7. In verse 11, it's saying. And so someone who lived in the past is coming back in the future. But when he comes, rather than going into hell in hell, he's going to dredge hell up with him into the earth, is what was his intent, to go into perdition. And this really is to bring, I guess, the fulfillment of the sin, the seed of sin that was sown in Adam, to fullness, so that it can essentially be judged and be removed from the earth, is what Yahuwah has been driving at in his plan of, I guess, salvation. And in his testimony of actually delivering and ridding the earth of this, to kind of make it anew, as well, to rule in it forever, as we know he will do when he sends down the New Jerusalem. So if we start by looking at what Daniel said about the 4th beast, and then we can then see the kind of similarities, or how what Ezra now sees, how this aligns. So if you recall from Daniel 7, verse 7, we're going to look at chapter 7 of Daniel. He's saying, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. So we have looked really at these prophecies quite extensively in previous sessions that we have done. So I don't want to kind of rehash what we've said in the past. But so let's just go through it quickly, and we'll more focus on Ezra. We'll just kind of read this more as an aid memoir, so we can understand what Daniel saw that was also confirmed by the Revelator John in the book of Revelations as well, to then see how it compares to what the revelation that Ezra then had. So it goes on to say that these great beasts, which were 4, it's talking about the 4 beast systems here, 4 separate beasts Daniel saw. He saw one for the Babylonian Empire, one for Medo-Persia, if you recall, also. I think it was a bear with flesh in its mouth, if you recall, that was taught to, and also he sees a leopard for Medo Persia, for Greece. And then, of course, this leopard, this with great iron teeth, as a fourth beast system. Saying these are beasts, these are four kings which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. So here it's implying a stamping out of a residue. And we have looked as well in Psalm 83, where Yahuwah is saying that these nations via the tabernacle system have conspired to stamp out or to remove Israel from being a nation in the earth as well. So this is also alluded to here by the prophet Daniel in, as I say, all these centuries, but even before the coming of Christ. He's saying it here, and of the 10 horns there were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. And I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. Now, the reason I've highlighted this here is because it does really, define a very important point that really isn't taught at all in the current narrative around the end times as they're currently taught. So currently we have the rapture doctrine, and we have looked extensively into rapture doctrine to realign it to the scriptures, to find that it is really what would be called dispensationalism. Rapture as a doctrine didn't formally exist as a church doctrine before the late 18th century. The 19th century, I beg your pardon. It is quite a recent appendage in terms of doctrines to the church. And it's not believed either by all denominations. It's mainly the evangelical denominations are the denominations that it has more taken hold in. I don't believe even Catholics have it as a doctrine, to be honest. And many denominations do not know it as a doctrine as well. So I really would encourage, everybody to really search the scriptures, Yahuwah said, because in them you have eternal life. And Yahuwah said that these are they that testify of him. So I really would admonish you to really delve into the scriptures for yourself to really understand what we are being told here, because it's critically important. Because here we're being told, saying that the same horn, this 8th, who was of the 7, so this one who lived in the past was coming back in the future to go into perdition or to dredge hell up, is coming to make war with the saints and prevail against them. Now, there's only one condition under which this horn could prevail against the saints. And that really is redefined in Revelation 13. So if you recall in John's revelation of the great wonder in heaven, John sees this great wonder, this woman who gives birth to this child, this infant that's caught up unto God, so signifying really the birthing of Christ in a sense, and also it's signifying really the reawakening also of Israel in the latter days, in the end of days also as well. If you notice, she actually escapes by fleeing into the wilderness. And we have actually looked at this whole concept, even around the review we did on the rapture, to understand that it's usually Yahuwah that actually takes and hides his people away in times of judgment, while his judgment actually comes upon the wicked. So the actual righteous are normally shielded or removed. So Revelation 13 tells us that the actual woman escapes by fleeing into the wilderness. So it's saying here, I guess essentially, that those that don't flee, that this horn will wage war against them and prevail against them because they didn't flee. So, as I say, that's a critical point, which is very, very important that we understand as well, to understand what the indicators are around that, and when the point will be, when it'll be time for Yahuwah's people to make that departure, as he has said, as we're being told here in the scriptures, because that particular aspect is not taught within the current teachings around the rapture doctrine at all, with the risk that many are going to miss their salvation, and then as a result be fought against by this little horn. So it's telling us many things. I haven't really gone into details really, because it's telling us, it's saying it has great iron teeth. So it's telling us really that it is in a sense, a machine, or it kind of has these kind of technologies, industry as well. We can kind of see kind of essences of there, nails of iron, nails of brass rather, and that's devouring and breaking in pieces. So even conducting a covert agenda to destroy the earth. And we looked in Revelations at the fact that there is a judgment that Yahuwah has prescribed against those that do destroy the earth in the end of days. So a lot we're not going to get too much into. So I'm just saying that to say in verse 21, do take more of a closer look at that, and also do look into the actual prophecies in Revelations 13 as well, that do actually talk about the end times and the day of the Lord as well, encoded in that whole great wonder in heaven that John sees the unfolding of as well, to understand what we need to do in the end of days, and really to obtain that salvation. So it's saying in verse 22, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given unto the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. It goes on to say, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth. Okay, which is where we currently are, in the fourth kingdom. This kingdom, is saying, shall be diverse from all the kingdoms. So that's completely different, it's saying, to everything that ever went on before. And we see that because we explained that, for instance, even the name of the seventh king, who's currently ruling, was Constantine. And we said that what his name encoded was papacy, essentially. So we're in this, no longer in this militaristic regime, which is what Mystery Babylon had always been back to our origins, starting under the first king Nebuchadnezzar. He was a military leader and king who led an army, essentially, and conquered by force. So this is using a kind of softer power to conquer by, but the concept is still the same. The armies are still there. Everything else is still there, but the actual presentation, now it's saying, is different, it's diverse from everything that went before. He's saying, and he's saying, it shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces, he's saying here. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. So we're being told that another king is coming, who's diverse or different from everything that's gone on before, because Daniel, in other separate prophecies, I've not provided here, but he goes on to say that this one who is coming will even come to worship a God that no one's ever heard of before. So he'll come to actually worship or give his honor or give praise to a God of forces, and it's saying. And he shall subdue 3 kings, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the patience, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws as well. Well, already we see some tenets and aspects of that as well, because essentially we see how even, essentially, well, you can only say the papacy have changed times and laws, because Yahuwah has said, for instance, that the Sabbath day should be the 7th day of the week, but of course it was the actual papacy that said that the Sabbath day was going to be the sun worship day, or the first day of the week, which is what it had been really under their pagan traditions before they came under, came into contact with Christianity. So you have to recall that Constantine, in trying to, Christianize his kingdom, had to make concessions also to the pagans as well that were also within his kingdom, to try to, not allow revolt to kind of be the result. So he did compromise and actually, keeping all of the pagan festivals, essentially, just Christianizing them, which is why none of the actual feasts as mandated by Moses in Leviticus 23 are currently kept within the Christian calendar at all. So the Christianity as a global religion today keeps the pagan holy days or holidays I have to call them, are not the actual biblical ones as prescribed by Moses in Leviticus 23, of which there are 7. Yes, already changing times and laws as well, because even the calendar system, the Julian calendar system, the Gregorian calendar system we all live by today were basically constructs devised by this system. So already they are already essentially changing times and laws. Also, Yahuwah had said, we did also look in a previous video I did, I think it was called our Yashralite calendar, a 13th month, I think it was called that. We looked at the whole way in which Yahuwah had said that 1 year should comprise 364 days, not 365 days, as are currently mandated in our current Gregorian calendar system. So we already are in this kind of dispensation or system that already does think to change times and laws. That has already come to pass, essentially. So they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of a time. So this is actually the Great Tribulation period. So he's only given 3.5 years. And you'd think that being quite a short time, there wouldn't be so much time to kind of wreak too much havoc. But anyway, it's saying, but the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Okay, so that is what Daniel said about the fourth beast. That was what Daniel said about the fourth beast. So in the times previously, Job is actually saying here the earth was given into the hand of the wicked. I believe that now actually we are seeing really an intervention by the hand of God in our current day, really, around all of this, because there has been so much error and so much, what I'm looking at for, so much of, I guess, people going into darkness consciously rather than being willing to come to light. And I think this has really provoked the Most High considerably. And I think we are currently seeing or living in the midst of the unfolding of judgment around a number of these things that have been going on in recent times. So I'm not really going to read the scripture because I think it's to an extent being overruled by what Yahuwah is doing in current events in now taking back his power and authority to set the earth in righteousness, really. And I think we're going to see the outworking of that as we kind of move forward in this year. But now let's move on, as I say, to our reading in 2 Esdras 11. So in order to kind of give you some assurance that this is a biblical book that we should accept, really around our kind of biblical reading and understanding of the Word of God, I'm going to give you some provenance for Esdras and show you that he is one and the same as a prophet Ezra. By starting by looking at his genealogy. So, in the opening preface to 2 Esdras 1, verse 1, Esdras, who's writing, gives his genealogy. You'll find, if you actually look and compare to what he says is his genealogy in Ezra 7, verses 1 to 5, that it is precisely and exactly the same. So 2 Esdras 1:1, he's saying, the book of the prophet Ezra, son of Sariah, son of Azariah, son of Hilkiah, son of Shallum, son of Zadok, son of Ahitub, son of Ahijah, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, son of Amariah, son of Azariah, son of Miriamoth, son of Anna, son of Uzi, son of Borith, son of Abishua, son of Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron of the tribe of Levi, who was a captive in the country of the Medes in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of the Persians. So that's what he says is his genealogy in 2 Ezra 1:1. If we look at what he says in Ezra 7, verses 1 to 5, and this is as in the book of Ezra that's in our current Bible today, and that is accepted as core canon. So he's saying here that, now after these things, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Ezra, the son of Sariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Hilkiah, the son of Shallum, the son of Zadok, the son of Ahitub, the son of Amariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Mirioth, the son of Zerahiah, the son of Uzi, the son of Buki, the son of Abishua, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the chief priest. You'll see it's exactly the same. And I've actually put a color code on here so you can actually see where all the names are really repeated in both texts. He's one and the same person, son of Aaron, of course, son of Phinehas. So he really is of the creme de la creme of the priests, because the sons of Phinehas, if you recall, it was Phinehas who averted a great plague really from breaking out amongst Israel in the land of Moab as they were coming into their promised land by really averting a judgment. And Yahuwah commended him for it and did say that it would fail a man or to be in his house to actually minister before him, as a result of what Phinehas had done. So this was a family that were very, very greatly blessed and honored by the God of heaven. And they were considered to be almost like royalty within the tribe of Levi, essentially. So he's a very, very high pedigree, was a Prophet Ezra, though very humble in spirit. So let's now come on to look at what Ezra saw in his vision. So it goes on to say that, then saw I a dream, and behold, there came up from the sea an eagle, which had 12 feathered wings and 3 heads. And I saw, and behold, she spread her wings over all the earth, and all the winds of the air blew on her, and were gathered together. And I beheld, and out of her feathers there grew other contrary feathers, and they became little feathers and small. But her heads were at rest. The head in the midst was greater than the other, yet rested it with the residue. So essentially, this is what Ezra sees. So he sees this 3-headed eagle. So this is a more correct picture here, just the 2 legs. But it has 12 wings, so you have to actually imagine that these are all separate wings. Kind of like, a bit like here, you can see a kind of wing on the bottom, and then other wings on the top. So it's actually 12 separate wings that this eagle has. So it's not like any kind of ordinary eagle that you may know. It's quite a fierce, ferocious creature. So let's go on. So essentially, you can see the difference, because we have shown that both Daniel and the Revelator John saw the image that we saw on the right. We did actually look at Revelations 13:2 as well. I should also put that reference here. But we did look at Revelations 13:2 to actually look at this whole creature, how it describes her as having the body of a leopard and feet as of a bear and mouth as the mouths of lions. Of course, these 10 crowns upon the heads as well, upon the 7 heads. So we have actually looked at this in previous Sabbath sessions. So why now is there a difference? Now we've got a bird kind of against a kind of land creature, and yet we're saying they're both representations of the 4th beast, both representations of the same thing, essentially. Well, that's because they're not quite revelations of the same thing. So the eagle really is kind of telling us more about the who of what the 4th beast system is, in terms of actually explaining to us or showing us, revealing to us the operation of Edom, essentially. Because, of course, the 4th beast system, as we said, is under Rome, which is another name for Rome, could say is Edom, essentially. And whereas the actual image that Daniel and the Revelator see more is telling you about the what, I guess, the beast system is. Because we saw this system Of course, the whore of Babylon is sitting on the back, so actually controlling this creature, sitting on the back. And of course, the actual 10 kings have their horns upon their heads as well. And then they have this conflict. We did explain how the horns, it's saying they hate the whore, and they fight against her and burn her with fire. And they do a contend against her and her policies as well, quite significantly as well, and try to cast off her bondages, her chains. But yet they both worship, they're both on the same entity. They both worship the same thing. So really just showing us that there isn't necessarily agreement always in the kingdom of darkness. And that often evildoers are united solely by their determination to defy the God of heaven, but not necessarily in agreement with each other. Anyway, so that's essentially what Esdras is actually seeing here. So we're now going to look at the who the fourth beast system is and how it is operated through antiquity, through history, and really see how the unfolding of these prophecies as well, given as far back as Ezra. So now Ezra lived, as I said, at the time of the return of the captivity from Babylon. So I believe it was Cyrus the Great who gave the actual decree in about 538 BC, if I'm not mistaken, for Israel to be able to return. So Ezra records he arrived in Jerusalem in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes. So, beg your pardon, it's in around 458 BC is when Ezra is recording he arrived in Jerusalem. So Cyrus the Great allowed them to return to Jerusalem in 538 BC. So Cyrus the Great, as we have identified or mentioned, was actually now the third king of Mystery Babylon. And we've given the names of all of these kings in the message we did, who are the 7 kings of Revelation 17:10. We've given all of these names in that, a breakdown of all 8 names as well. We even identified the one from the past is coming back in the future as well, we found. And we corroborated it, as I said, by doing an investigation into some of the literature and writings of the Muslims to see who they were expecting to return. And we found, as I say, the 2 names we found corroborated perfectly. And as I explained, I didn't look at the information before I prepared my notes. But yet it's substantiated by the information that we found. So do by all means, if you want to know the names of all of the 8 kings of Revelation 17:10 to 11, then do by all means go onto our site or go onto our YouTube channel and look at that video, who are the 7 kings of Revelations 17:10. Okay. So looking at Edom now and why, I guess you have this analogy to an eagle. So there are other references in the Word of God that do also align Edom to an eagle, one of which is, of course, the vision of Obadiah. Now, Obadiah does actually foresee the judgment of Edom as well in the end of days as well, and gives further detail around that. Here, in the whole book of Obadiah is devoted really to the judgment of Edom, essentially. It's got an extract here of it from verses 1 to 4. Really do summarize or encapsulate this depiction of Edom as an eagle, this eagle creature. So the prophet Obadiah is saying here, the vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord God, concerning Edom, we have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, let us rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? So it's saying here, it's even alluding to here, Edom's liking for dwelling in towers or high-rise buildings or high-rise structures or in high places here. And also talking about a pride of Edom's heart, saying, she's saying in her heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? But Yahuwah is saying here that though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord. It's alluding as well to her kind of mission to go into space travel and to be set amongst the stars. Yahuwah is saying here, he's promising to not allow that, or to, well, he may allow them to do it, but it won't stand or prevail by any means, is what he's saying there. So it's saying here that though thou exalt thyself as the eagles, so here there's an analogy to Edom being aligned to an eagle. And that does happen in scripture as well. There are scriptures that do actually align Edom to eagles. But let's go on anyway. So he goes on to say in verse 5 of Esdras, or 2nd Esdras 11, moreover I beheld, and lo, the eagle flew with her feathers, and reigned upon earth, and over them that dwelt therein. And I saw that all things under heaven were subject unto her, and no man spake against her, no, not one creature upon earth. And I beheld, and lo, the eagle rose upon her talons, and spake to her feathers, saying, watch not all at once, sleep every one in his own place, and watch by course. But let the heads be preserved for the last. And I beheld, and lo, the voice went not out of her heads, but from the midst of her body. Okay, so we're being told several things here. So it's saying that the eagle flew with her feathers and reigned upon earth, and over all them that dwelt therein. So it's saying that all things really were subject to her as well. And that she's kind of given a strategy or a command here. So the heads, you can see, are very, very much firmly in charge. And of course, Mystery Babylon did actually start with a rule by the heads, or initially by the kings, were the ones who initially bore rule. But eventually that was actually divested to the feathers, as you'll see, and the kings took more of a back seat as well in the whole kind of unfolding of this history and of this agenda. So here that you can see that saying, we've actually kind of given an instruction here. Everyone is not to kind of participate at once, but they're going to kind of give a kind of like an agenda of providing, I guess, rulers to rule by course, who they select. Because as you can see, the actual agreement that went out of the midst of her body, which does imply really, I guess, alluding almost like to a Senate type structure or to some kind of gathering or congregation or tabernacle system, of course. It's actually making the determination as to who's actually going to take the office all the time, the place to rule. By the course as they are establishing here. That's why the voice goes out of the midst of the body and out of the heads, because normally you'd expect if you hear a voice to be coming out of the head, as it would do if you're normally like a person talking. You would see their mouth moving and the voice coming out of their mouth. But here, the voice is actually coming out of the midst of the body of this bird, because of course she is a collective, she's a tabernacle system, as we've said, and not tabernacle singular, but tabernacle plural, because there are many tabernacles of various hues and types, as well as tabernacles even over some of the actual guilds and professions as well, and livery clubs and all sorts of different divisions of these systems as well. So it's saying here that she also had wings, full-blown wings, and also contrary feathers as well. And these do represent different things. So the wings represent not quite kings, but they represent, well, I guess they could be kings, but they represent like emperors or Caesars or kind of senior rulers. And then the feathers represent more, perhaps maybe senators or a kind of a hierarchy here of kind of leadership as well. So there were 8 kind of contrary feathers. Now I didn't actually, I kind of lost the will because of reading this history. And I was keen to kind of look into it because, as I say, it's been the history that, I guess, has presided over our, can I call it? Well, over, I guess, where we find ourselves today. So I was kind of keen to understand or to kind of look more into it for that reason. But I kind of really couldn't get too much concerned to kind of concern myself to look into it too deeply. So I didn't actually find, I'm sure if I had looked for it, I could actually identify probably by name, the actual names and identities of the contrary feathers it's alluding to here. I think there were 8 of them, I guess, throughout the actual course of this kind of initial rule of these initial 12 feathered wings as well. So I only looked really for the actual wings. I didn't actually look into the actual history around the feathers, which, as I say, I'm sure I would have found had I done further investigation around it. But it's saying here, and I looked, and behold, on the right side, there arose one feather and reigned over all the earth. So it does get a little bit, because it starts to now confuse the wings with the feathers. So it's kind of saying initially that it had 12 feathered wings, and now they're kind of being alluded to as feathers here. So still there arose one feather, it reigned over all the earth. And so it was that when it rained, the end of it came, and the place thereof appeared no more. So the next following stood up and reigned and had a great time. This is where it gets interesting. So the prophecy goes on to say, and it happened that when the second feather or the second wing reigned, and the end of it came also, like as the first, that it appeared no more. But there came a voice unto it and said, Hear thou, that hast borne rule over the earth so long. This I say unto thee, before thou beginnest to appear no more. There shall none after thee attain unto thy time, neither unto the half thereof. So you'll come on to see really how this is relate to the actual second king of this system, because the second emperor of this regime did rule, I believe, for about 40 years, either 40 or 41 years, something like that. And of course, no other ruler, exactly as the prophecy is saying here, ruled after him for even half as long as that time. It went through a succession of 10 other very, very short rules, as we'll see. So we're going to come on to actually look at the names of who those kings are in just a second. Then arose the third and reigned as the other before, and appeared no more also. So went it with all the residue one after another, as that every one reigned and then appeared no more. So there were 12 feathered wings, weren't they? So they're saying they all reigned, and then after a time they didn't appear any longer at all. It says, Then I beheld, and lo, in process of time, the feathers that followed stood up upon the right side, that they might rule also. And some of them ruled, but within a while they appeared no more. Okay, so it's saying that all the 12 feathers essentially ruled. And you'll see, because really in the actual history of this Mystery Babylon, you'll see a kind of split. So you'll see that the actual Mystery Babylon system, it kind of morphs into this this kind of religio-political system under Constantine. But even after Constantine's reign, it does appear to perpetuate or to go on as well in parallel for a little time. And I'll come on to explain what I mean by that as we come to it. Perhaps I shouldn't jump ahead and just we can work our way up to it, as I say. So it's saying here in verse 20, Then I beheld, and lo, in process of time, the feathers that followed stood up upon the right side, and that they might rule also, and some of them ruled, but within the while they appeared no more. For some of them were set up, but ruled not. After this I looked, and behold, the 12 feathers appeared no more, nor the 2 little feathers. So this is essentially what the prophet Esdras is seeing. So here listed here are the first 12 emperors of this, Roman Empire. Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Galba, Otto, Aulus, Vitellius, Vespasian, Titus, Domitian, Nerva. And of course, as I went on to show, as you just saw, of course, Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian, of course, are all related. Vespasian is the father of both Titus and Domitian. They became known as a Flavian dynasty. The word Flavian means yellow hair, as I've said here. So this is essentially what Ezra was seeing, as I say, as early as the 6th century, before the coming of Christ. So, of course, starting with Augustus. So Augustus, of course, was his first uncle and adopted father, of course, was Julius Caesar himself. Apparently, he was the first princeps. Princeps apparently means first in time or order. So in our current day, we say that the leader political party or a system is a first amongst equals. So you can see that a lot of these actual principles are not fundamentally new. They do come, well, from antiquity, in this case, from Rome. So apparently his father was one of the first people to attain the rank of senator, and his mother as well was the daughter of a person called Julia, who was a sister of Julius Caesar as well. So very much in the family. So these people really are, I guess, well, presided over a lot of, you call it destruction, really, of, well, certainly the early Christians, of course, which, of course, our forefathers were the first initial early Christians, of course, as we have said. And the book of First Maccabees, of course, 1 verse 9, really our forefathers really are saying that really on the coming of Alexander the Great, it kind of went all downhill from there, because from the time of his actual starting to come, it says Alexander the Great actually went through the earth, killing all the kings of the earth. And from that time, the evils began to multiply in the earth, apparently. And this entity as well, as you know, Yahuwah has condemned in Revelation 17:16 as being drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus as well. So this essentially is the actual, are those who actually led that regime to actually do that, essentially. And I guess when they couldn't subdue it, I guess you can't beat something, join it. So they can then convert it to this kind of religio system as well. So, but really, I mean, looking into the history of these people, I mean, what can I tell you? Yeah, Nero, of course, we know Nero from history, the one who apparently was famous for actually believing to have burnt Rome down and blaming it on the Christians as well. And he was actually famous for the persecution of Christians as well. And had a very troubled family life. I think his mother poisoned her second husband apparently to become the wife of her uncle, Claudius, persuading him to then favour Nero for succession. So I think he succeeded when he was about 17 years of age, very, very young, which I think is way too young for that level of responsibility. And I think eventually it's reputed he actually ended up murdering his mother as well, and his wife as well, ordering his wife to be put to death as well, and then going slightly crazy. But anyway, it's when the revolts that broke out in his empire, of course, he didn't know what to do, being quite so young. But I mean, I'm not really going to get into kind of giving a breakdown of all of the rulers here and kind of what they did. But as I say, these did lead all the attacks very much on the Vespasian himself leading the destruction of Jerusalem. He actually initiated the actual siege of Jerusalem, and of course left it in the care of his son Titus to rush back to Rome to be crowned as emperor. And then Titus also returned in 71 AD to Rome victorious, having destroyed, having laid Jerusalem waste, or having conquered, they call it the rebellion of the Jews, in 70 AD as well. And then to be succeeded by his brother Domitian, who then built in memory of Titus's victory, the actual, I'm not sure what its actual proper name is. I call it the Titus Arch, which I do have a picture of it. The arch readers commemorate Titus's victory. And so today, if you get on a plane and go to Rome, go to a place called Palatine Hill, apparently this arch sits on that hill, apparently, built by Emperor Domitian, son of Vespasian, as I said here, to commemorate his victory in the conquest of Jerusalem, essentially, in putting down the rebellion of the Jews. So you can see on the actual right side here is a carving, actually from the side of this self-same arch, which shows you it's actually meant to be a scene from the actual procession. So when they returned, or when Titus returned, supposedly in victory, with the gold and many of the things that were taken out of our temple at Jerusalem. They actually did parade some of the actual artifacts through the street. They had like a victory parade, essentially, where they paraded actually items from our temple through the streets. So if you recall the actual candlesticks, they weren't, because you couldn't think of a candlestick as being quite a small thing you set on a table, but these were actually freestanding candlesticks that sat on the floor, and they were huge objects. If you recall, the first candlestick was made by Bezalel in the wilderness, and he made it of one piece of solid gold, of beaten gold. So quite a lot of skill it would have taken to actually heat the gold and actually work it while it was hot to get it into these beautiful ornate shapes. And as he did, because if you recall, it had knops on it, so to look like pomegranates periodically, all the way up the actual branches, from the way it's described in the actual in the Bible, as via the pattern that was given to Moses in the Mount to explain to Bezalel, and Bezalel, of course, constructed these things. So it was a big, hefty thing. As you can see, it took 4 men to carry it. It was quite heavy because, of course, it was of gold. So they carried it through the streets. So this is actually meant to be a carving to actually commemorate that victory parade or that event. It's actually on the side of this Titus Arch to this day, really showing as well that our treasures as well were taken. As Yahuwah has said as well in Joel 3 verse 5, because you have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly pleasant things as well. Yahuwah is saying here, as one of his indictments, actually in coming on the day of the Lord as well, to bring judgment for these things. So yes. So I'm not going to get really into a litany really of these first emperors, but these essentially are the 12 feathered wings that Esdras, 2nd Esdras 11 is actually alluding to. This is what Esdras is seeing all these hundreds of years before any of this even came to pass. So we can see again how Yahuwah is again directing all the affairs, the whole unfolding of human history, and as even really our lives essentially are completely bound up in, I guess, the unfolding of this history, as well essentially. What an awesome God! So it goes on to say, 2nd Esdras 11, reading from verse 23, and there was no more upon the eagle's body, but 3 heads that rested, and 6 little wings. Then saw I also that 2 little feathers divided themselves from the 6, and remained under the head that was upon the right side. For the 4 continued in their place. And I beheld, and lo, the feathers that were under the wing thought to set up themselves and to have the rule. And I beheld, and lo, there was one set up, but shortly it appeared no more. And the second was sooner away than the first. And I beheld, and lo, the 2 that remained thought also in themselves to reign. And when they so thought, behold, there awaked one of the heads that were at rest, namely, it was in the midst, for that was greater than the 2 other heads. And then I saw that the other 2 heads were joined with it. So you see, these are the 2 feathers that separated themselves from the other. Initially there were 6, and they separated themselves from the 6 and came and went on the right side of the eagle, where I guess they weren't authorized to go. And so the heads, who've really been, I guess, the taking a bit of a back seat, but nevertheless the kind of steerers or orchestrators of this whole unfolding of this, where this whole kind of beast creature is operating, then awaked, and then began to actually devour the feathers, as you'll see. And then I saw that the 2 other heads were joined with it. And behold, the head was turned with them that were with it, and did eat up the 2 feathers under the wing that would have reigned. But this head put the whole earth in fear, and bare rule in it over all those that dwelt upon the earth, with much oppression, and had the governance of the world more than all the wings that had been. Well, I think really, well, it's obvious really that the heads would be the ones who would really be ruling everything, because normally doesn't all rule of everything come from the head? I mean, even your human body can't function without a head, really. So the heads have really been the silent, maybe taking a back seat, but nevertheless guiding and steering events, as you can even see, as to how it actually reined in the two wings that decide to separate themselves from the other four and come and kind of move themselves around to the side of the right side to kind of begin an independent kind of move to try to break away from the collective, if you will. So saying that this head put the whole earth in fear. And after this I beheld, and lo, the head that was in the midst suddenly appeared no more, like as the wings. But there remained the two heads, which also in like sort ruled upon the earth and over those that dwelt therein. And I beheld, and lo, the head upon the right side devoured it that was upon the left side. Then I heard a voice which said unto me, Look before thee, and consider the thing that thou seest. And I beheld, and lo, as it were a roaring lion, chased out of the wood. And I saw that he sent out a man's voice unto the eagle, and said, Hear thou, I will talk with thee, and the highest shall say unto thee, Art not thou it that remainest of the four beasts, whom I made to reign in my world, that the end of their times might come through them? And the fourth came and overcame all the beasts that were past, and had power over the world with great fearfulness, and over the whole compass of the earth with much wicked oppression. And so long time dwelt he upon the earth with deceit. For the earth hast thou not judged with truth. So here a higher is saying this beast had power over the earth with great kind of trying to drive its fear into everyone and everything on the earth. But it ruled and judged with deceit. So pretending to be one thing that it really wasn't, while secretly, covertly, under the covers, kind of conducting a different covert agenda. It says, For thou hast afflicted the meek, thou hast hurt the peaceable, thou hast loved liars, and destroyed the dwellings of them that brought forth fruit, and hast cast down the walls of such as did thee no harm. Therefore is thy wrongful dealing come up unto the highest, and thy pride unto the mighty. The highest also hath looked upon thy proud times, and behold, they are ended, and his abominations are fulfilled. And therefore appear no more, thou eagle, nor thy horrible wings, nor thy wicked feathers, nor thy malicious heads, nor thy hurtful claws, nor all thy vain body, that all the earth may be refreshed, and may return, being delivered from thy violence, and that she may hope for the judgment and mercy of him that made her. Okay, so quite an interesting prophecy, showing that we all rule at the end returns and reverts to the heads. So the heads being essentially the kings, essentially. Because, of course, it all started with the heads, of course, Nebuchadnezzar being the very first head, if you recall. So it's saying that this head that was in the centre bare rule and drove great fear into the earth with much oppressions. So it's also saying that that head actually disappeared after a time as well. But it's saying that there remained, so it's saying that the actual central head disappeared after a time. So in terms of the heads, well, the heads, of course, so we looked in Jeremiah 50, verse 2, at this kind of unholy trinity of Mystery Babylon, as Babylon, Bel, and Merodach, as it's saying. That Bel is saying Babylon is taken, Bel is confounded, Merodach is broken in pieces, as we had said. And these are symbolizing this, I guess, unholy trinity, the kind of king. And Nebuchadnezzar, we said, was the first whore of Babylon, the first king of Babylon. And also this kind of also Bel and Merodach as well, this kind of Antichrist, this eighth creature as well. So it's saying that you could liken this, and if you recall as well in Revelations 13, we're told about the actual coming of the dragon, which is this seven-headed creature, of course, that had 7 heads and 7 crowns upon the heads. And of course, then we had this beast, creatures of this leopard creature that had 7 heads, 10 crowns, 10 horns, and 10 crowns upon the 10 horns as well. So this represents the actual beast or the Antichrist, and also Bel, because of course Bel or Baal is the god of the Mystery Babylon beast system. So that's why they all give their strength to worship the beast or worship the dragon. So it's telling you that a time comes when the actual head on the right devours the head that's on the left. And that's substantiated as well by Revelations chapter 19. So Revelations 19 goes on to explain or to say, so it's talking about the actual battle of the Armageddon. So it's saying in Revelations 19, verses 16 to 20, it's saying, and he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, Come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God, that ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great. And I saw the beast, and the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse, and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire, burning with brimstone. So here it's implying, it's certainly saying that the actual false prophets, which we're saying essentially is the head or the whore, was taken away, and also the actual beast as well. So it's saying here that the head on the right devoured the head on the left. So the actual Satan himself isn't actually cast out until sometime, considerable time after the beast is taken. So isn't that amazing? The beast is going to be so prolifically a blasphemer that he manages to get into hell even before the devil is cast in there. Is what the scriptures say. And Esdras' vision as well appears also to say the same thing. So this beast, or the dragon, actually devours the beast, essentially, and is the last himself to be removed by the Almighty himself. So there is a lot we could probably get into in this scripture. As I say, I didn't do the research to identify who all the contrary feathers were. Maybe at some other point I will get the wherewithal to look into it. But it's such a litany of Apologies, family. My laptop for some reason just stopped recording as I was coming to the end of our video. I was in the process of concluding. So as I was saying, yes, I didn't actually do research into the 8 contrary feathers. I believe I was saying in concluding. As I was saying, it was just a litany. The whole history was such a bleak history. I think there was once a writer that said the past is like a foreign country where they do things very differently. It really was a different world of great brutality, really, in former times, and just no kind of regard or respect for human life generally. And the whole history I found quite just a brutal litany of intrigue and disaster, and a lot of the slaying of Christians as well. And many of whom, of course, would have been our forefathers. So yeah, I couldn't really be moved to kind of find the wherewithal to kind of get too fully into kind of doing further research on it. So as I say, we may come back in another session to look a bit more further at this whole prophecy and to understand who the contrary feathers actually are. But yes, a lot we didn't actually explore in this reading of chapter 2 Ezra 11 of the book of 4 Ezra. It is really such a vast, there's so much really that we could have gone into. We didn't really look at the significance even of things like the difference between the right and the left wings, of course. So the right wings, of course, were the 12 feathered wings. This bird had 12 feathered wings, 12 feathered right wings, and then 8 contrary left wings as well. So yes, it really just does tell you really that there's a kind of central body essentially that appoints governments is what it's actually telling us. of this overall tabernacle system. But really very much also because, as we say, it is a tabernacle system, it also has an impact also on the appointment of governments worldwide, everywhere, is what Ezra is telling us here. And Ezra foresaw all of this when he was writing in around the 6th century before the coming of Christ. So long ago, before this whole entity even came into existence. So you can see, how does our world work? Well, precisely as Yahuwah foretold by the prophets. So you can see really how right on this word truly is. And we can even look into it today as the perfect law of liberty. And literally, you can see what is going on around us in our world today, because it's all encoded in this book. So Yahuwah, our wonderful Heavenly Father, has not only not left us comfortless, because of course He's sent us His Holy Comforter, the Holy Spirit. You can only really understand the Word of God truly through the Holy Spirit. He's also given us wisdom and instruction as well through this wonderful book to really show us what time it is and to help us to really to understand just what's going on around us every day in our present world. What a mighty God. So we're going to sign off today, for now, and we've got to looking at Prophet Ezra's vision or prophecy about Mystery Babylon. We may, as I say, revisit this whole chapter subsequently at some point. If there's interest in it, by all means do let me know in the comments below this video to really fully unpack. Perhaps by then I would have done the additional review to identify the 8 contrary wings or feathers as well, and to unpack further really around a lot of the actual themes that are presented in this chapter also. Because we're told other things as well, like we're told all the winds of heaven blew on her, which is really implies that she is channeling, well, powers really from every kind of source, really aligning again to the whole kind of origin of this Mystery Babylon system, rooted in divination, as we've said, in channeling principalities, powers, different spirits from an array of different sources, precisely as Nebuchadnezzar had done back in antiquity. So as I say, there's a lot we haven't really even touched on in what we've looked at so far to date, but let's call it a day for now. We'll kind of draw a line under where we've got to currently in this particular study. And as I said, we may revisit to look at some of the other themes as well that are presented here. But yes, as I say, it presented a litany of very bleak events, really, that did result in great or prolific loss of life, and really also the loss of, I guess, Jerusalem, which our forefathers lost at that time, and were then scattered throughout throughout Europe, essentially. Those who didn't flee, didn't heed Yeshua's prophecy. If you recall, the prophecy gives in Luke 21:24 about how when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, they were told not even to return into their homes to take anything out of their houses, but just to flee immediately in whatever they were standing up in, to flee to the mountains. And as we know, well, the rest is our history. Many Yasharites did actually heed Yeshua's warning and flee into Africa. Yasharites have always fled into Africa to hide. Even Christ himself, if you recall, his parents fled into Africa to flee, to hide him from Herod, because it was said of Christ, it must needs be said of Yeshua, that out of Africa, out of Egypt have I called my son. So, yes. So anyway, as I say, we'll draw a line under where we've got to currently in our review of 2nd Ezra's 11, or the book of 4 Ezra, and we will reconvene again next Sabbath around another study. So remember, family, you and I, we are the repairers of the breach, as per Isaiah 58:12. Hashtag, we will restore his paths. Bye for now.